My sister set me up by telling our parents I'm a slut and a drug addict. They kicked me out years later. At my wedding, my father messaged me and wrote, "So look, I'm gonna be straight with you. This whole thing started when I was 20. My sister was 22 at the time, and apparently that was the age where she decided to completely nuke my life for reasons I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Let me paint the picture. I'm the youngest of 2 kids. Sister's name is Rachel, always been the golden child. Straight A student, volunteered at animal shelters, did yoga, had this whole perfect daughter thing going. Meanwhile, I was just existing, playing basketball after school, working at a local grocery store stocking shelves, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Nothing special. Definitely nothing that warranted what came next. Our parents were pretty standard middle-class folks. Dad worked in accounting. Mom was a nurse. They were decent people, I thought. Little strict sometimes, but nothing crazy. The kind of parents who'd ground you for coming home past curfew, but would also drive you to the ER at 2 a.m. if you were sick. Normal stuff. Rachel and I weren't close. Never had been. She was always off doing her own thing, and I was doing mine. We didn't fight much because we barely interacted. Looking back, maybe that should have been a red flag. She was like this stranger I shared a house with. But I figured that's just how some siblings are, right? Everything changed one random Tuesday in March. I remember because it was my buddy Jake's birthday, and we were supposed to go bowling. Instead, I came home from my shift at the store around 7 p.m. to find both my parents sitting in the living room with these stone-cold faces. Rachel was there too, sitting on the couch looking like she'd been crying. My dad told me to sit down. That's never a good sign. I sat on the chair across from them and waited. Mom wouldn't even look at me, just stared at her hands. Rachel was doing this thing where she'd glance at me and then look away real quick, like she couldn't stand to see me. Then my dad just came out with it. He said Rachel had told them everything, that I'd been bringing girls home when they weren't around, that I'd been using drugs, that our neighbor had called Rachel concerned because she'd seen suspicious people coming and going from the house, that Rachel had found substances in my room, that I'd stolen money from them to pay for my habits. I just sat there thinking this had to be a joke. Like any second someone was going to start laughing and tell me it was a prank. But nobody was laughing. My dad kept going, saying they were disappointed in me, that they didn't raise me to be like this, that they were worried about what I'd become. I finally found my voice and told them none of that was true. Not a single word. I'd never done drugs in my life. I'd never stolen from them. The only girls who came over were friends from school, and they'd met most of them. I tried to explain, but my dad cut me off. He said Rachel had proof. She'd taken pictures, apparently. She had dates and times written down. That's when Rachel pulled out this little notebook, started reading off these entries. March 3rd, came home and smelled strange substances in the hallway. March 10th, found suspicious residue in bathroom. March 15th, noticed money missing from cookie jar. On and on. All complete fiction. But she'd written it down like some kind of evidence journal, and my parents were buying every word. I asked to see what she supposedly found in my room. Rachel said she threw it away because she didn't want it in the house. Convenient. I told them to search my room right now. Go ahead. Check everything. But my dad said that wasn't the point. The point was I'd violated their trust. That even if there wasn't physical evidence anymore, Rachel's word was enough. That stung. Rachel's word was enough. But mine wasn't. My mom finally spoke up. Asked me why I'd do this to the family. Why I'd throw my life away. She actually had tears in her eyes. I felt like I was in an alternate reality. Everything they were accusing me of was completely made up, but they believed my sister without question. Didn't even consider for a second that maybe she was lying. I tried again to defend myself. Told them this was insane, that Rachel was making everything up. I don't even know why. But the more I pushed back, the angrier my dad got. He said addicts always deny everything, that I was just proving his point, that I needed help, but he couldn't help someone who wouldn't admit they had a problem. Then he told me I had until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live. Just like that. 3 days to pack up and get out. I was being kicked out of my own home because of lies. I looked at Rachel, and she had this expression I'll never forget. Not smug exactly. More like resigned. Like she'd done what she had to do, and now she was just waiting for it to be over. I asked her why she was doing this. She didn't answer. Just looked down at her notebook. My mom told me not to blame Rachel. That this was my own fault. That Rachel had tried to help me by keeping quiet for weeks, but she couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. What a hero. The next 3 days were a blur. I called everyone I knew trying to find a place to crash. Most of my friends still lived with their parents and couldn't help. I finally got hold of my buddy Ethan, who just rented an apartment near the community college. He said I could sleep on his couch until I figured things out. I packed everything I could fit in my car. Clothes, laptop, some books, my basketball. Left behind most of my childhood. My parents didn't speak to me those 3 days. They'd leave the room when I walked in, like I was already gone. Rachel stayed in her room mostly. I tried to confront her once, knocked on her door, asked her what her problem was. She opened the door just a crack and told me I should have been more careful. More careful about what? I wasn't doing anything. She just closed the door in my face. On my last day there, I left my key on the kitchen counter. My mom was making coffee. I told her I didn't do any of the things Rachel said, that I hoped one day she'd realize that. She didn't respond. Just kept pouring her coffee like I wasn't even there. I walked out and drove to Ethan's place. Living on Ethan's couch was rough. The guy was cool about it, but I could tell it was cramping his style. Plus, I felt like garbage. Here I was, 20 years old, homeless, because my own family believed lies about me. I kept my job at the grocery store, but started picking up extra shifts whenever I could. Saved every dollar. Skipped meals sometimes to make rent money stretch further. Started buying the cheapest everything. Generic brand cereal. Day-old bread from the bakery section. Learned real quick how to live on basically nothing. Ethan was finishing up his last year at community college and had his own routine. I tried to stay invisible. Would wake up early before he got up, fold my blankets, stash them in the corner. Came home late after he'd already eaten dinner. Showered at odd hours, used the bathroom when he wasn't around. Tried not to be a burden even though just existing there felt like I was in the way. Sleeping on that couch messed with my back. Woke up sore every morning. The couch was old and lumpy and too short for my height. I'd curl up weird and then spend the first hour of work trying to stretch out the kinks, but I didn't complain. Ethan was doing me a solid, and I wasn't about to make it harder for him. My parents didn't call. Not once. I thought maybe after some time they'd calm down and want to talk. Realized this whole thing was extreme. But weeks went by and nothing. My phone was silent. I tried calling a few times. Dad wouldn't pick up. Mom picked up once and just said she needed space to process everything, and then hung up. That messed with my head more than I expected. Like, your kid is homeless and you need space? Space from what? The kid you just threw out? I kept replaying that conversation in my mind. She'd sounded tired, frustrated, like I was the one causing problems by calling, not like she was worried about where I was sleeping or if I had food. Just needed space. Cool. Great parenting. I'd lie on that couch at night, staring at the ceiling thinking about how fast everything had changed. One day I had a home and family. The next day, I had a couch and a trash bag full of clothes. All because Rachel decided to make up some story. I still couldn't figure out why. What did she gain from it? Was she jealous of something? Did I do something to upset her without realizing? Or was she just bored and decided to blow up my life for entertainment? The worst part was the rumors. Somehow word got around that I'd been kicked out for drugs. I don't know if Rachel told people or if my parents mentioned it to neighbors or what, but suddenly people I'd known for years were looking at me different. Couple of regulars at work made comments. One lady I'd helped for months stopped shopping during my shifts. Jake asked me straight up if the rumors were true. I told him no, but I could see doubt in his eyes. After 2 months on Ethan's couch, I found a room to rent in a house with 3 other guys. It was cheap, and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. The room was barely bigger than a closet, but it was mine. I kept working at the store and started taking online classes for an associate's degree in business management. Figured I needed something more than high school if I wanted to make anything of myself. Here's where things get interesting. About 6 months after I got kicked out, I was at the grocery store during a shift. I was stocking the cereal aisle when I overheard these 2 women talking. They were around my mom's age. I wasn't really paying attention until I heard Rachel's name. One woman was saying how worried she was about her daughter hanging around with Rachel, that Rachel had gotten into some trouble recently. The other woman agreed, said she'd heard Rachel had been caught shoplifting from a boutique downtown. Said the store didn't press charges because Rachel's parents begged them not to. Said it wasn't the first time either. I froze. Kept my head down, but listened hard. First woman said she'd heard Rachel had some kind of issue with lying, that she'd made up stories about people before, that Rachel's college roommate had moved out because Rachel told people the roommate was stealing from her when it wasn't true. Second woman said her sister's daughter went to high school with Rachel, and there'd been drama there too. Something about Rachel spreading rumors that turned out to be completely false. They moved on down the aisle, and I just stood there holding a box of cornflakes. Rachel had a history of lying. My parents must have known, or at least suspected. But when she pointed the finger at me, they didn't even question it. They just chose to believe her and throw me out. I wanted to chase down those women and ask for more details. When did this happen? Who else knew? Did my parents know before they kicked me out? But that would have been weird, and I was working. So I just finished stalking and spent the rest of my shift thinking about it. That night on Ethan's couch, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. If Rachel had a pattern of lying, if people in town knew about it, then why did my parents believe her so easily when she accused me? Did they actually believe her? Or did they just want an excuse to get rid of me? That thought hit different. What if this whole thing had nothing to do with drugs or girls or any of that? What if they just didn't want me around anymore and Rachel gave them an out? I spent weeks turning that over in my head, analyzing every interaction I'd had with my parents before everything went down, looking for signs I'd missed. Maybe they'd always resented having a son? Maybe Rachel was always their favorite, and they were just waiting for a reason to pick her over me. Maybe I'd been fooling myself thinking we were a normal family. I finished my shift in a daze. Part of me wanted to call my parents right then and tell them what I'd heard. But what was the point? They'd already made their choice. And I realized something that night lying in my tiny room. I didn't need them. I was doing fine on my own. Better than fine, actually. I was working, going to school, paying my own way. I didn't need parents who'd believe lies over their own son. That's when I decided to go full focus mode. I worked my butt off at that grocery store. Got promoted to assistant manager after a year. The owner noticed I showed up early, stayed late, never called in sick, never complained, just put my head down and worked. He told me I reminded him of himself when he was young, gave me more responsibility, let me handle scheduling, inventory orders, employee issues, used the tuition reimbursement program they had to finish my degree faster, took classes online whenever I had free time, would study during lunch breaks, stay up late working on assignments, finished my associate's degree in business management in under 2 years. The day I got my diploma in the mail, I sat in my tiny room and just stared at it. I'd done that. No help from anyone. Just me pushing through. Kept my head down and built my own life. Moved from that cramped room to a slightly less cramped one-bedroom apartment. Bought actual furniture instead of milk crates and sleeping bags. Got a real bed. Had a kitchen table. Little things that probably seemed basic but felt huge to me. Meanwhile, crickets from the family. Birthdays came and went. Holidays. Nothing. I didn't reach out either. What was I supposed to say? Hey, remember when you kicked me out based on complete lies? Good times. First birthday alone was weird. I bought myself a cake from the bakery section at work. Sat in my apartment and ate it straight from the box watching whatever was on TV. Told myself it didn't matter. Just another day. But it did matter. It always mattered. I dated here and there, but nothing serious. Went on dates with a few girls from the area. Coffee here, movie there, but I could never really open up. How do you explain your family situation without sounding damaged? So I'd keep things surface level, and eventually they'd move on. Fine by me. Most of my energy went into work and school anyway. Didn't have time for complicated relationships. I moved up to store manager after 2 years. The owner was retiring and offered me the position. It came with a decent raise and benefits. Health insurance. Paid time off. 401k matching. Things I'd never had before. The pay was decent, and I finally felt like I was getting somewhere. Moved into my own one-bedroom apartment in a nicer part of town. Nothing fancy, but it had a dishwasher and my own parking spot, and that felt like success. Had a little balcony where I'd sit some mornings with coffee. Watch the sun come up. Feel like maybe I'd actually made it. Around this time, I met Lisa. She worked at the bank next to the grocery store. She'd come in during her lunch break, and we'd chat. Started casual. She needed help finding something, and I'd walk her to the aisle. Then she started coming in more often, even when she didn't need anything. We'd talk by the produce section. She made me laugh. Had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. Would make these comments about the weird customers or the overpriced organic stuff, and I'd just crack up. She was funny, smart, didn't take life too seriously. Never seemed to care that I was just a store manager. Didn't ask why I wasn't in some fancy job or why I drove an old car. Just liked talking to me. That was new. We started getting coffee on my breaks. Then she asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime. Actual dinner, not just coffee. I said yeah, without even thinking about it. Our first real date was at this Italian place near her apartment. Nothing expensive, but the food was good. We talked for 3 hours, about everything. She told me about her family, her job, her dreams of maybe traveling someday. I told her about work and school and my apartment with the balcony. Didn't mention my family? Wasn't ready for that conversation yet. We started seeing each other regularly. She'd come by the store during her lunch break, and we'd eat together in the break room. I'd pick her up after work, and we'd drive around, get food, talk. She was easy to be with. Didn't demand constant attention or get mad if I had to work late. just fit into my life like she'd always been there. After a few months, I knew I had to tell her about my family situation. We were getting serious, and she'd started asking when she could meet my parents. I kept making excuses. They're busy. We're not close. They live far. Finally, one night we were at my apartment, and she asked point blank what the deal was. So I told her the whole story. Rachel's accusations, my parents kicking me out, the 5 years of silence, everything. I was nervous. Would she think I was lying too? Would she think there must be some truth to it if my own parents believed it? But she just listened, asked a few questions, then said any family that would do that wasn't worth my time. That's when I knew she was different. She didn't doubt me, didn't ask if maybe I'd done something to deserve it, just believed me, accepted that my family had failed me and moved on. She said her family was my family now if I wanted, that her parents would love me, that I didn't need people who'd thrown me away. I met her family a month later. Her parents lived about an hour away in this nice suburban neighborhood. Her dad, Greg, shook my hand, asked about my job, seemed genuinely interested. Her mom, Patricia, hugged me like she'd known me forever. They had me over for Sunday dinner, made pot roast and mashed potatoes, sat around the table talking and laughing. It was so normal it almost hurt. This was what family was supposed to be like. Lisa's younger brother Sam was there too. College kid, into video games and comic books. We hit it off talking about basketball. He invited me to come watch games with him sometime. Patricia kept making sure my plate was full. Greg asked if I needed help with anything at work or around my apartment. They just folded me in like I'd always been part of the family. After dinner, Patricia pulled me aside, said Lisa had told them about my situation, that she was sorry I'd gone through that any son of Lisa's was a son of theirs. I almost cried right there in her kitchen. This woman I'd known for 3 hours was offering me more support than my own parents had given me in years. From then on, I was part of Lisa's family. Sunday dinners became a regular thing. Holidays at their house. Birthday celebrations. Patricia would call me just to check in. Greg would text me articles about managing businesses or ask my opinion on stuff. Sam would invite me to concerts or games. They included me in everything. Never made me feel like an outsider or a charity case. Just treated me like family. 3 years after getting kicked out, I proposed to Lisa. We were at this park where we'd had our first real date. Nothing dramatic. Just asked her if she wanted to make this official forever. She said yes before I even finished the question. We decided on a small wedding, her family and our friends. That was it. I didn't plan on inviting my parents or Rachel. Why would I? They'd made it clear I wasn't part of their family anymore. Lisa's parents were great. Her dad helped me pick out the venue. Her mom went dress shopping with Lisa and kept sending me pictures, even though I wasn't supposed to see the dress. They treated me like I'd always been part of their family. That's what family was supposed to be like. We set the date for September, booked a nice spot at this garden venue outside the city. Nothing huge, maybe 60 people. Lisa handled most of the planning because I was still working full-time. We were paying for everything ourselves. No help, no loans, just our savings and smart budgeting. 2 months before the wedding, I got a friend request on social media. My dad. I stared at it for a solid 10 minutes. Just his name and profile picture. Him and my mom on some vacation. They looked older. Dad had more gray hair. I let the request sit there for a week before I finally accepted it out of curiosity more than anything else. Nothing happened at first. Then a few days later, I got a message. It was long. Started with "Hi son." That alone was weird. 5 years of silence. And suddenly, "Hi son," like we'd just talked yesterday. The message was basically him saying he'd been thinking about me, that he and mom had been talking about reaching out, that Rachel had moved out, and they'd been reflecting on things, that they realized they may have been too harsh, like they'd grounded me instead of kicking me out of my life. He said they'd love to reconnect, maybe get coffee and talk. He mentioned he'd heard through the grapevine that I was engaged. "Congratulations," he wrote. "We'd love to be there if you'd have us." I read that message probably 20 times. Each time I got more irritated. No apology, no acknowledgement that they'd completely destroyed our relationship over lies. Just this casual "we've been thinking about you" like they'd been busy and forgot to call. I didn't respond. Showed Lisa the message. She read it and raised an eyebrow. Said it was up to me, but reminded me that these people chose to believe the worst about me without even giving me a fair shot. That they'd let 5 years go by without checking if I was alive. That if I did let them back in, I should be ready for more disappointment. She was right. But I also couldn't stop thinking about it. Part of me wanted to write back and tell them exactly what I thought of their too harsh comment. The other part wanted to just block them and move on. I compromised. I didn't respond, but I didn't block them either. Just left it on red. A week later, my mom sent a message. Similar vibe. Lots of "we miss yous and we'd love to seize." Said she'd spoken to Rachel, and Rachel felt terrible about everything. That Rachel had grown up a lot. That maybe we could all sit down as a family and work through things. That made me laugh. Rachel felt terrible. Sure she did. Felt so terrible she hadn't reached out once in 5 years. Hadn't sent a single message saying, "Hey, maybe I exaggerated." No. Now that I was getting married and probably looked successful, suddenly everyone felt terrible. I was venting to one of the guys I worked with, Anthony. He'd been there when I first got promoted to assistant manager. Knew my whole story. He listened and then asked me one question. "What do you actually want here? Did I want them at my wedding? Did I want a relationship with them? Or did I just want them to acknowledge they screwed up?" Honestly, I didn't know. I'd spent 5 years building a life without them. I had Lisa, her family, good friends, a solid job. I didn't need them. But maybe some part of me wanted them to see what I'd built. To see that I'd made it without them. That their golden child Rachel wasn't the only one who could succeed. But that felt petty. I told Anthony that, and he shrugged. Said sometimes petty is valid. Said they'd hurt me badly. And if I wanted them to see that I'd thrived despite them, that wasn't wrong. But I should be honest with myself about what I wanted. I thought about it for days. Finally decided to respond. Kept it simple. Told Dad I appreciated him reaching out. That I'd thought about it and wasn't ready to reconnect. That I had a life now, and I was happy. That I hoped he and Mom were doing well, but I needed to focus on my future. Didn't mention the wedding specifically. Dad wrote back almost immediately. Said he understood, but hoped I'd reconsider. That they really wanted to be part of my life again. That they'd made mistakes, but family was family. He ended with, "Please think about letting us come to your wedding. It would mean everything to your mother." There it was. The wedding. Of course that's what this was really about. They'd heard I was getting married, and suddenly wanted back in. Probably didn't want to look bad to relatives or neighbors when people asked where they were in the photos. Or maybe they genuinely felt guilty. Hard to say. I showed the message to Lisa again. She made a face. Said if I wanted them there, she'd support me, but personally, she thought they'd lost the privilege of being at important moments in my life. That they'd missed 5 years and didn't get to just waltz back in because it was convenient. Lisa's dad had a different take. He said sometimes people realize too late what they've lost. That parents aren't perfect, and maybe they genuinely wanted to make amends. But he also said I should trust my gut. That if something felt off about their timing, I was probably right. I decided to call Jake. We'd stayed friends through everything, and he'd been straight with me from the start. He picked up on the second ring. I told him about the messages. He was quiet for a minute, then said, "Remember when you tried to tell them the truth and they wouldn't listen? Remember when you needed them most and they kicked you out? Those things happened. You don't owe them anything." That settled it. I wrote back to my dad one more time. Told him I'd made my decision. That I wouldn't be extending an invitation to the wedding. That Lisa and I wanted to keep it small and personal with people who'd been there for us. That I wished them well, but I'd moved on. Sent it before I could second-guess myself. The response came an hour later. This time it was longer. Dad said he was disappointed, that he'd hoped I'd be more mature about this. More mature. I almost laughed. He said family was supposed to forgive, that holding grudges was unhealthy, that they'd only done what they thought was best at the time, that Rachel had been very convincing, and they were just trying to protect the family. So there it was. Still defending the decision. Still acting like I was the problem for not forgiving them fast enough. No real apology, just disappointment that I wasn't falling in line. I didn't respond to that one. Just archived the conversation and moved on with wedding planning. 2 weeks before the wedding, I got another message. This time from Rachel. First time I'd heard from her since the day I left. The message was shorter than our parents. Said she'd heard I was getting married. Congratulations. Said she knew I probably didn't want to hear from her, but she wanted me to know she was sorry. That she'd been dealing with her own issues back then and took it out on me. That she hoped I could forgive her someday. I stared at that message for a long time. Her own issues. That was the explanation? 5 years of my life derailed because she had issues? I wanted to write back and ask exactly what issues justified making up an entire drug addiction and getting me thrown out. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Nothing she said would change what happened. I did something I probably shouldn't have. I looked at Rachel's social media. It was public so I could see everything. She'd graduated college, had a job at some nonprofit, lots of pictures with friends, at events, looking happy. Normal life. Meanwhile, I'd spent 5 years rebuilding from scratch because of her lies. The more I scrolled, the angrier I got. She got to just move on, go to college, have mom and dad's support. Probably never had to work 2 jobs or sleep on someone's couch or deal with people looking at you like you're a junkie. She'd faced 0 consequences for destroying my life. I closed the app and didn't respond to her message either. Some things you don't forgive. Some people don't deserve a response. Wedding day came. It was perfect. Warm, but not hot. Lisa looked incredible. Her dad walked her down the aisle, and I'll admit I got a little choked up. Not gonna lie, there was a moment during the ceremony where I thought about my parents. Wondered if they were thinking about me. Wondered if they regretted anything. But then I looked at Lisa, and everyone there supporting us, and realized these were my people now. This was my family. The reception was at the same venue. We did a small dinner, some dancing, nothing crazy. Lisa's mom gave a speech that made everyone cry. One of my coworkers gave a speech about how I'd gone from sleeping on a couch to running a store and planning a wedding. That got some laughs and some applause. Everything was winding down around 10 p.m. when I checked my phone. I'd been ignoring it all day. Had a bunch of congratulations texts from friends, some pictures people had tagged me in, and one message from my dad, sent about 2 hours earlier. The message was long. Started with "saw pictures of your wedding on social media. You looked happy. Guess that's a friend of Lisa's who has public posts. He said he was glad I'd found someone, that he and mom were proud of me. Proud. That word made me see red for a second. Then the message took a turn. Said they'd been doing some reflecting, that Rachel had finally admitted she'd exaggerated things back then. Exaggerated. Not lied. Exaggerated. He said they'd been too quick to believe her without hearing my side fully. Too quick. Like it was a minor whoops moment, and not 5 years of no contact. He said they'd like to fix things if I was open to it. Maybe we could meet up. Talk it through. They wanted to be part of my life again, especially now that I was starting a family. They didn't want to miss out on being grandparents someday. There it was. The real reason. Future grandchildren. They didn't reach out because they missed me or felt guilty. They reached out because they saw pictures of a wedding and realized they might miss out on the next generation. Classic. The message ended with "please think about it. You only get one family. Mom and I made mistakes, but we want to make it right. We love you." I showed the message to Lisa during a quiet moment. She read it and shook her head. Said that was bold of him to say they were proud after abandoning me for 5 years. Said the grandparent comment especially was manipulative, trying to use hypothetical future kids to guilt me into reconciling. I agreed, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't mess with my head a little. They were still my parents. Part of me still wanted them to acknowledge how badly they'd screwed up, to really apologize. But this message made it clear that wasn't happening. They'd reframed the whole thing as a misunderstanding. Rachel exaggerated. They were too quick. Just unfortunate circumstances that no one could have predicted. I spent the rest of the reception thinking about what to say back. Should I write a long message explaining exactly how their choices had affected me? Should I tell them about sleeping on couches and eating ramen for months and dealing with people thinking I was on drugs? Should I explain that you don't get to skip 5 years and then demand access to future grandkids? In the end, I kept it simple. Waited until the next morning when Lisa and I were having breakfast before heading to the airport for our honeymoon. I wrote back, "Thanks for the message. I'm glad Rachel finally told you the truth about exaggerating. That must have been difficult to hear. As for fixing things, I've spent 5 years building a life without you. I'm happy now. I have people who believe in me and support me. I don't think adding you back into that equation makes sense. I wish you and Mom the best, but I've moved on. Please respect that." Hit send and turned off my phone. Lisa raised her coffee mug to me. Said I'd handled that with more grace than she would have. We laughed and headed to the airport. Spent a week in Mexico not thinking about my family at all. When we got back there were more messages. Dad asking me to reconsider. Mom sending a longer message about how they'd been wrong and wanted another chance. Rachel sending another apology saying she understood if I hated her, but hoped we could talk someday. I read them all once and didn't respond to any. Lisa asked if I felt bad. Honestly, not really. These people had 5 years to reach out. They chose not to. They could have checked if I was alive, if I had food, if I needed help. They didn't. They waited until they saw I was successful and happy, and then decided they wanted back in. That's not how it works. A few of Lisa's relatives asked why my family wasn't at the wedding. I kept it vague. Said we weren't close anymore. Most people didn't push. One aunt kept asking questions, so I finally told her the short version. She looked shocked and said she couldn't imagine a parent doing that. I said, yeah, well, it happens. My parents tried calling a few times over the next month. I didn't answer. They sent a few more messages that I left unread. Eventually, the messages slowed down. Every few weeks I'd get one. Just checking in. Hope you're doing well. Miss you. Standard stuff. Never addressed the real issue, though. Never said, you know what, we completely failed you as parents and we're genuinely sorry for not believing you. After a few months, I blocked their numbers. Not out of anger. Just felt like the right time to close that door completely. I'd spent enough mental energy on people who didn't deserve it. Had a wife to focus on. Had a career. Had plans for the future. Last I heard through mutual connections, Rachel moved to another state for work. My parents are still in the same house. They apparently tell people they have a son who lives nearby, but they're not close. Nearby. I live 2 hours away. But I guess that's easier than explaining they kicked their son out over lies, and he wants nothing to do with them. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.